We're going to shift a little bit on the questions. We've had a number of questions come in that involve sort of the public health effects and other air quality issues. One of the audience is asking, what are other air quality contaminants outside of burning firewood that may cause serious health issues within the community the borough or ADC is looking at as a serious health risk and moving toward attainment? So we're talking about other possible contaminants. We want to take a shot at that?
I guess I'll try and take a shot at it. I mean, the primary focus here with fine particulates, we don't just focus on just direct particle emissions. We also look at secondary formation from other what we call precursor pollutants. That includes sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, ammonia. All of these are pollutants that are emitted through combustion that can combine and form secondary particles in the area. So in the air. So there are other pollutants of concern. So we don't just look at just pure directly emitted particulate matter. We also look at a suite of what are gaseous pollutants that can ultimately form particles as well. I don't know I'm not sure if that totally answers the question, but
there's a couple of things to add. So we started looking at what could form PM as well. And when you have reactions in the air that ends up, it could go into your respiratory system and react in your respiratory system. So we're continuing to study those. Some of the initial look that we've had of what has happened in this area from the 2015 to 2018, is that right, Nicole? That's when we looked at the bend map data. Initial look at what we found is that there's a reduction in the mortality rates in this area with data from this community. So improving air quality has some mortality effects. We are also looking at other secondary health effects that are beneficial by reducing pollution levels. We're still in the preliminary phases of that, but when we have numbers to share, we will bring that back to the community. So there's positive correlation to reducing air quality, and that's proven by actual numbers from this community. And so in terms of what other organics there are, what other pollutants there are, I think we are aware of SO2 has its own standard, NO2 has its own standard because they also directly affect people's ability to breathe and affect the quality of life. Of course, when you also have different kinds of wood, they have volatile organics in it. And so there are some of them could be what we call polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Those are, they have more complicated effects. It's harder to study, but definitely I have heard some interest from the research community wanting to study that. So that's a lot of work still to be done there.
Okay. It's a busy field. So Krishna, probably back to you here. Does the EPA expect to revise, possibly reduce the existing PM 2.5 standard? If so, how might this impact communities such as Fairbanks?
So as I initially started out saying, our mandate from Congress is to look at all these 6 pollutants every 5 years and see if the current level is protective of public health or not, of the general population and sensitive population. So for PM, the next standard review is supposed to conclude December 2020. So yes, we will be looking at that. Just last month, we invited public comment on the initial staff proposal on looking at both the annual and the 24-hour standards. And I just passed that on to both the borough and the state to look at and comment about your implementation experience and make public comments on EPA's process. The proposal for that standard will come out, the plan this December, and the final will be next December. So please get engaged now as a community to comment as leaders and engage citizens of the community to make sure that the administrator of EPA takes into account your input as he looks at the decision. So the way the process works is that there's a science process. There's a science process that EPA staff look at. There's a Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee that is populated by the president, the administrator, and they look at what the science is and recommend something to the administrator. The administrator then looks at everything, the broad set of comments he gets from the citizens of the U.S. and makes a decision as to where to, how to weigh that input and make a final decision. So that's something that I highly encourage that you look at. And get involved in that process.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
So I guess, as Krishna said, they're just in the first part of this process with this staff report. That I think it's the staff report is what it's called. Yeah. So they're taking comment on that now, and I often hear from people in the community about the health standards and their concerns with the health standards or the science or other aspects of the actual setting of the standards. And that's not something that the setting of the standards is something that the state adopts later, but that's a federal rulemaking. So this is an opportunity that you all have, to the extent that you have interest, to the extent that you have knowledge, that you have input that you want to make. This is the first place. And so, I mean, I always encourage people to take advantage of the opportunities that you do get to comment, not only at the local level and the state level, but also at the federal level. So this is an opportunity for all of you, and I just want to encourage you all to take advantage of it if you have an interest in doing so.